Over the next decade, Ted released one Dr. Seuss book a year with modest but progressively higher sales.
I think there was some opposition because the books didn't fit into a certain kind of traditional idea of what kids' books should be, particularly primers. You know, there was a very prim attitude toward the primer.
The juvenile bestseller lists were dominated by books that were cute, sentimental, and safe.
Ted wasn't interested in expanding the envelope. He didn't acknowledge that there was an envelope. One Beyond Zebra is the wildest book I've ever seen because it's about the alphabet after Z. And he made up funny, crazy letters that, you know, that make a kind of Seussian sense.
I think that in the end, the thing that I always think of when I think of Seuss is I think of kids. The stars of Seuss's material, the focus of his material are children who go through something. They go in one end of something and come out the other end of this psychedelic world. You wonder what this guy was on when he was writing these things, maybe.
There was among that kids' book establishment a kind of a residual sense that Dr. Seuss was the Quick Henry the Flit guy. They really couldn't quite understand how that translated into this world of children. And I think he had to wait for them all to die.
Ted's childhood remained a limitless source of inspiration. Whenever he returned to Springfield, he would visit the zoo, still run by his father.
"It's a pretty good zoo," said young Gerald McGrew, "and the fellow who runs it seems proud of it, too. But if I ran the zoo," said young Gerald McGrew, "I'd make a few changes. That's just what I'd do. I'd open each cage. I'd unlock every pen, let the animals go, and start over again. And somehow or other, I think I could find some beasts of a much more unusual kind."
Well, I think he allowed a child's imagination to guide where he was going to take his stories.
"I'll bring back a gusset, a gherkin, a gasket, and also a gooch from the wilds of Nantasket. And 8 Persian princes will carry the basket. But what their names are, I don't know, so don't ask it. Then the whole town will gasp, 'Why, this boy never sleeps. No keeper before ever kept what he keeps. There's no telling what that young fellow will do.' And then, just to show them, I'll sail to Catrue and bring back an Itcutch, a Preep, and a Prue. A Nurgle, a Nerd, and a Seersucker, too. Wow, they'll all cheer. What this zoo must be worth. It's the gall-darndest zoo on the face of the earth."
My dad used to say, and it's important to remember that he published Eugene O'Neill and William Faulkner and John O'Hara and all kinds of other people, but he always used to say that Ted was the true genius of all of those people, and he would say that in public, sometimes annoying some of those other authors.
Despite his bad experiences in Hollywood, Ted held out hope that he would one day make a feature film. He got the chance with his story called The 5,000 Fingers of Dr. T.
It happens in an amazing castle with a tickle-em-to-death torture chamber and a 500-player piano with 480,000 keys.
When he got a producer and was to make this wonderfully delicious film of a little boy running over giant piano keys, Hollywood said, "You have to have love interest." And Ted was screaming, "I don't want a love interest. I want that little boy running over the piano." And he wanted to make pure fantasy.
Dr. T is sweet on Mrs. C. So is Mr. Z, the plumber, who fixes sinks.
He says, "You know, I did a movie once. I thought it was going to be great. And I'm never going to get over it."
Ted called the flop the biggest failure of his career and vowed never to make another film. "Hollywood is not suited for me," he said, "and I am not suited for it." Ted returned to the tower to work on his books with Helen.
She was supportive of Ted. She understood Ted's talent, and he wouldn't have been Dr. Seuss without her. He trusted her absolutely.
In May of 1954, Ted would become incapable of working when his wife contracted Guillain-Barré syndrome, a rare disease similar to polio. A paralysis started in her feet and crept up her body until she was paralyzed to the neck. Unable to breathe on her own, Helen was placed in an iron lung.
Because for a while, there was doubt as to whether she would live. Going through that period where he thought he was losing her was just tremendous. He focused in on her, and he was strong for her, but it was a dreadful period.
Helen's paralysis eventually receded with treatment. After months of rehabilitation, she learned to talk and walk again, although she never completely recovered.
I'm sure she knew he was already tremendously burdened, and that in worrying about her, and that it would affect his time to work, and she wanted him to feel free to work. But she told me once, I always feel as if my shoes are 2 sizes too small. I think she lived with discomfort from then on, but boy, they worked through that together.
Elementary Schoolroom, USA. It's a wonderful part of the American scene.
When the children of the post-war baby boom were reaching school age, it was a time of unprecedented prosperity. Many parents could look forward to providing their kids with a college education. If only they could read. Illiteracy rates soared as television became a distraction, and the old-time readers seemed more boring and irrelevant than ever.
The Dick and Jane books were so white bread, you know, middle class, the children were so clean and so obedient and so nice, and not at all like real children.
Those cherubic, blonde Aryan children really were, I think, the precursor to my whole lack of self-esteem. Because I think it kind of set the bar for this perfection that I never had for a second in my life.
With the Why Johnny Can't Read controversy in the national spotlight, 51-year-old Ted Geisel accepted a challenge to write and illustrate a reader using a list of only 225 words. I read the list 40 times, Ted said, and got more and more discouraged. It was trying to make a strudel without any strudels. Desperate, he decided to write a story around the first 2 words that rhymed, cat and hat. Over the period of 1 year, the book slowly came together. The most important thing about me, Ted once said, is that I work like hell. Write, rewrite, reject, re-reject, and polish incessantly. To write a 60-page book, I write more than 1,000 pages before I'm satisfied.
The sun did not shine. It was too wet to play. So we sat in the house all that cold, cold, wet day. All we could do was to sit, 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 and we did not like it. Not one little bit.
And of course, Ted introduced chaos and, you know, the way kids really behave and the things that they're sort of scared about and fascinated about as well.
We looked, then we saw him step in on the mat. We looked, and we saw him, the cat in the hat. And he said to us, "Why do you sit there like that? I know it is wet and the sun is not sunny, but we can have lots of good fun that is funny."
But the way Ted used these words over and over again was fun and exciting, because it was all involved with action and something happening all the time.
Look at me! Look at me! Look at me now! It is fun to have fun, but you have to know how. I can hold up the cup, and the milk, and the cake. I can hold up these books, and the fish on the rake.
You know, I remember the Cat in the Hat came into these kids' lives and took them on this odyssey. I mean, I guess I thought of him as somewhat of an anarchist. You know, of course, I didn't know the word.